Now, I'll be honest, I'm not the best at video games. I will demolish my friends at Smash Bros. And Mario Kart, but anything else, I don't know, I leave a lot to be desired. This is especially true when it comes to platformers, but most of my platforming woes come from third-party games like Super Monkey Ball and Crash Bandicoot. Surely I wouldn't struggle with a Nintendo game, right? Wrong! I made a video a while back about games that I've struggled to beat, and lately, I've been feeling adventurous. Why not go back and try to beat some of the games that I never could? With the release of Donkey Kong Country Returns HD on the Switch, I thought it was a perfect opportunity to finally beat Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D. This was a terrible mistake. I struggled at Donkey Kong Country Returns back on the Wii when I was a kid, but come on, I was a kid. I didn't even know my times tables. You really expect me to beat a video game? You'd think things would have changed by 2021, but they didn't. I picked up Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D, and although I did significantly better than before, I still struggled. At least I knew my times tables though. Since then, I've been playing the game on and off, making small progress over the years. And finally, I beat the game. Why did I struggle so much with it though? I don't think the difficulty is entirely a bad thing. In fact, I think that the approach of Donkey Kong Country Returns is actually refreshing. In most 2D Mario games, I simply run and gun without even thinking of what I'm doing. And it works! Boom! Level complete. The new Super Mario Bros. Games especially were a breeze. I could pretty much turn my brain off playing New Super Mario Bros. 2, and I'd still be able to beat the game in under an hour. In Donkey Kong Country Returns though, it's not that simple. You spend lots of time in each level just stopped and waiting for an opening. The lack of a timer in the game further encourages you to actually think through what you're doing rather than just speedrunning the level. As someone that's primarily played Mario games, I think it's a refreshing take, and I really appreciated it. Your moves have to be calculated and precise, which makes the game more skill-based, and that's great. Of course, old habits die hard, so there were plenty of times I found myself jumping right towards my death out of habit, even when I knew I shouldn't have done it, and that was incredibly frustrating, but overall, I appreciated the increased difficulty. At first. I'm not super big into difficult games, as I've said before, but I appreciate what they bring to the table. I've never played Elden Ring or Dark Souls, but I definitely see the value in them. And although I may not be the type of person to go out of my way to play a challenging game, I certainly won't back down once I'm being challenged. That being said, I do feel like Donkey Kong Country Returns was just downright unforgiving. There's a fine line between video game difficulty that's pure and genuine, and video game difficulty that comes from bad mechanics. Most Soulsborne games are genuinely difficult, not for any bad reason, but because it's what the developers intended. Super Mario Sunshine is a game where most of its difficulty comes from bad mechanics like its broken camera. Donkey Kong Country Returns is a game that takes that fine line and blurs the crap out of it. There were plenty of parts of levels where I needed to bounce off of an enemy, and it felt clunky to have to press the jump button at just the right time to bounce off of them. I died so many times because of that, it was stupid! I liked the rocket levels at first, but I quickly began to hate them once the one-hit deaths became a problem. The rocket levels became pretty hard towards the end of the game, and although I totally understand an increase in difficulty at the end of the game, that was more of a spike than an increase. The checkpoints were really far apart too, so one mistake was all it took for me to basically have to start over all the way from the beginning. Speaking of one-hit deaths, the kart riding levels were also a huge issue for me. Once again, I loved the concept at first, I really did, but it just started to get on my nerves. One slight mistake, and boom, I'm dead. Those levels towards the end of the game were really hard. And to make matters even worse, the controls for jumping between carts just did not work half of the time. The timing was incredibly specific. Even though 80% of Donkey Kong's body would appear to be inside of the cart, the game would just refuse to register it, and boom, I'm dead. If 80% of my 3DS got ran over by a car, would that be fine? Would it still work then? If you can't already tell, I lost my mind playing this game, dude.
Let it out. Let it out.
I understand requiring a fine level of precision in a difficult platformer, but holy crap, man, this game was on another level. It didn't even feel like my platforming skills were being challenged. It felt like I was just being straight up disrespected. It took me almost 30 minutes just to beat one level. One level! The biggest reason that the level of precision I needed to have annoyed me as much as it did is that the controls just were not meant for it. Using the circle pad is not ideal for this game, or many games, to be honest. Maybe it's just me, but I constantly ran into issues issues where I would either run too far ahead or not far enough. And when I needed to quickly run before an obstacle reappeared, Donkey Kong would not start and stop running fast enough. When I had to stop on a platform for a few seconds and then run to make a jump, I didn't make it half of the time because Donkey Kong just did not move nearly as far as I wanted him to before jumping. The circle pad feels very clunky in 2D platformers, and it doesn't let me be as precise as I need to be. I know, everybody blames the controller when it's really just a lack of skill, but seriously, this thing sucks. The worst part is that the circle pad isn't as big of a deal on other platformers. I played Super Mario 3D Land with no problems, but Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D? Oh boy! For a game this unforgiving, the clunkiness of the controls may mean the difference between me beating the level and me throwing my 3DS into a wall. The D-pad is perfect for platformers, and it's right there on the 3DS, so why didn't they let me use it? They let me use it on the Wii version of the game, why not the 3DS? It's such a missed opportunity. Now, I haven't played the Wii version in ages, so I don't quite know if that one controls better, and I haven't played the Switch version either, so I can't vouch for that. But at least on the 3DS, the controls are just sad. I know people complained about having to keep shaking the Wii remote, but honestly, I'd rather do that than deal with the 3DS circle pad. This game is also just downright confusing. There were a few levels where I simply didn't know what the hell was going on, and it took me a few minutes before I figured out what to do. I'd be totally fine with that if this was a puzzle game, but it isn't, and it's not trying to be one. I'm probably the only one with that problem, and it's not like it happens to me all the time, but it happened enough times to be a bit of an issue. The boss battles were especially confusing. Once again, maybe I sound like an idiot, I don't know, but there were multiple times where I had to go to YouTube to figure out what I was even supposed to do. It wasn't all of them, but a few of them really had me scratching my head. It was a vocal minority. I don't want to sound like an idiot, but man, I would have really appreciated if there were boss battles that were at least a little easier to understand. Maybe not easier to complete, but at least a boss battle where from the get-go I know what I'm supposed to do. And don't get me wrong, Donkey Kong Country Returns is a good game, but boy does it have some issues. And hey, maybe the issues were intentional, but at least to me, that is not what I wanted to get out of Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D. The game doesn't have a crazy story, but I mean hey, it's a 2D platformer. It doesn't need to have one. The soundtrack is a banger, as usual, and the graphics are good too. I appreciate the difficulty that the gameplay was trying to add, I just feel like it went a bit too far. But hey, at least I finished the game. It felt like a weight was lifted off of my shoulders when I beat the game, let me tell you. I picked up a copy of Tropical Freeze not too long ago, but after my experience with Donkey Kong Country Returns 3D, it's probably gonna be a while before I give it a whirl. If you're someone that loves a good challenge, I highly recommend these games. If you're like me though, you'd better prepare yourself because you are in for one hell of a ride.